There comes a moment in every life, a silent, uncomfortable moment, when continuing as you are hurts more than the fear of becoming someone new. You may not announce it to the world, but you feel it in your chest, a quiet realization. The version of you that once protected you is now the very thing holding you back. You have outgrown yourself. And yet, the thought of letting that old self die feels terrifying, almost unbearable. Because we don't just carry habits, we carry identities. We carry old beliefs, old wounds, old coping mechanisms that once protected us, but now imprison us. We cling to them not because they serve us, but because they are familiar. And familiarity feels safer than the unknown. But here is the brutal Stoic truth most people avoid. You cannot rebuild your life while defending the very version of yourself that keeps you trapped. Marcus Aurelius warned that renewal demands sacrifice. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when attachment ends. And Stoic philosophy makes one thing clear: real transformation is not born in applause, noise, or constant distraction. It is forged in solitude. When you step away from the chaos of the world, when the noise fades and the masks fall, you finally hear the truth your soul has been whispering for years. In silence, there is nowhere to hide, no one to blame, only clarity. You were not meant to stay small. You were meant to rise. But first, something within you must fall. In that quiet, uncomfortable space, you confront what is broken, release what no longer serves you, and choose, deliberately, who you will become. This is the moment where excuses die and authorship begins. And in this video from Stoic Sage Academy, you will be guided through the timeless Stoic truths that teach you how to dismantle the old self so the disciplined, powerful, and authentic version of you can finally emerge. 1. Solitude exposes the truth you can no longer escape. You cannot rebuild your life until you are willing to finally confront the parts of yourself you have been running from. Solitude is not isolation, and it is not loneliness. It is the condition in which truth becomes unavoidable. When the noise of the world fades, when opinions, expectations, and distractions fall silent, you are left face to face with your thoughts, your habits, your fears, and your unfiltered reality. This is precisely why most people fear being alone. Solitude removes every escape route. It forces you to confront what you buried beneath constant stimulation, relationships, validation, and busyness. The Stoics understood solitude not as retreat, but as a mirror, one that reflects your life with ruthless clarity. And without this clarity, change is impossible. Most people never realize how much of their identity is constructed from noise rather than intention. You behave a certain way because it is expected. You believe certain things because they were handed to you without examination. You repeat habits not because they serve you, but because they are familiar, predictable, and emotionally convenient. When you are surrounded by others, you unconsciously perform a version of yourself designed to fit the room. You adapt, adjust, and dilute yourself to maintain comfort and approval. But when you are alone, the performance ends. There is no audience, no mask, and the real you finally steps forward. In solitude, the lies you tell yourself lose their power. The lie that you do not have time to change. The lie that you are not ready yet. The lie that circumstances will somehow improve without deliberate effort. Alone with your thoughts, you can no longer outrun your patterns. You begin to see your life as it actually is, not as you wish it were. And that truth, uncomfortable, sharp, and humbling, is the starting point of freedom. Solitude exposes the habits that quietly drain your potential. It reveals how often you choose comfort over responsibility. It uncovers emotional triggers you have never learned to master. It highlights relationships that disturb your peace and ambitions you abandoned out of fear. Most importantly, solitude shows you the version of yourself that does not belong in the future you claim to want. The Stoics taught that a life cannot be changed if it is never examined. Solitude demands that examination. You cannot evolve while refusing to see yourself clearly. Clarity may be painful, but pain is information. Pain reveals what must be healed, what must be corrected, and what must be released. In solitude, you take accountability in a way the world never asks of you. And once the truth becomes undeniable, you can no longer tolerate living beneath your potential. Solitude is not where you lose yourself, it is where you meet yourself. And when you meet yourself honestly, you gain the authority to rebuild with intention, discipline, and dignity. The destruction of the old self begins in the silence you avoided and in the truth that finally sets you free. 2. The old patterns must be destroyed before anything new can exist. Nothing new can grow on top of behaviors that are actively destroying you. You cannot rebuild your life while continuing to feed the habits that broke it. Most people attempt transformation by adding new routines, new goals, new affirmations, while never removing the patterns that sabotage every step forward. They decorate the prison instead of tearing it down.
Stoic philosophy teaches that creation is impossible without prior destruction. Before you build, you must clear the ground. This requires identifying the behaviors that weaken your discipline, drain your energy, and trap you in repetitive cycles of frustration. Your old patterns are not merely habits, they are identities you have outgrown. The way you react under pressure, the excuses you repeat, the distractions you reach for, the people you tolerate. These are all extensions of the person you used to be. If you continue living by these reflexes, you keep the old self alive, and the old self is the reason you feel stuck, exhausted, and unfulfilled. To rebuild, you must be willing to let this version of yourself die. Not symbolically, not aesthetically, but behaviorally. Most people fail to change because they try to negotiate with their old patterns. They promise moderation. They delay commitment. They say, next week will be different. But destruction does not respond to negotiation. You cannot bargain with procrastination. You cannot reason with self-doubt. You cannot escape a full-time problem with part-time effort. The Stoics believed in removing what is unnecessary with decisive clarity. Without this step, transformation remains a fantasy. Your patterns feel powerful because they are comfortable. Even when they damage your life, they feel familiar, and familiarity always feels safer than the unknown. That is why the old self clings to routines that harm you. They protect the ego from discomfort, but growth begins the moment you choose discomfort over repetition. If the life you want requires different habits, then the version of you that resists change cannot come with you. There comes a moment when maintaining your old patterns becomes more painful than letting them go. And when that moment arrives, you finally understand what the Stoics meant by intentional living. You stop reacting impulsively and start acting deliberately. You stop letting emotion dictate behavior and begin aligning actions with your future. This is the real beginning of destroying the old self. Not a change in image, but the dismantling of the mental structure that kept you confined. You cannot rebuild on a foundation you refuse to tear down. And once you remove the patterns that no longer serve you, you create space, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, for a stronger, wiser, more disciplined self to emerge. This destruction is not loss, it is liberation. 3. The new self is forged through discomfort. Growth begins precisely where comfort ends. Most people want strength without strain, confidence without risk, and transformation without sacrifice. But the Stoics understood a fundamental law of change. The self that remains comfortable is the self that remains unchanged. Discomfort is not punishment, it is the birthplace of a new identity. Your old self was built in comfort, which is why it cannot take you where you want to go. Comfort trained you to avoid challenge, to choose ease, to protect the ego rather than expand capacity. Each time you choose what is familiar, you reinforce the limits that held you back for years. Discomfort does the opposite. It forces confrontation. It demands expansion. It creates the tension between who you are and who you are capable of becoming. Discomfort is evidence that you are stepping into territory your old self avoided. It signals learning. It strengthens character. It develops emotional resilience. The Stoics practiced hardship deliberately. Cold exposure, fasting, simplicity, not to suffer, but to condition the mind to remain steady under pressure. They understood that avoidance breeds fragility, while endurance builds stability. Every meaningful transformation requires you to face the resistance you once escaped. Discipline cannot form without resistance. Emotional strength cannot develop without emotional exposure. Clarity cannot emerge without confusion. These uncomfortable moments build the muscle of your new identity. Without them, change remains imaginary. If you only act when things feel easy, you will recreate the same life endlessly. And if that life is no longer enough, comfort can no longer lead you. Discomfort becomes your compass. It points directly toward growth. Once you understand this, you stop fleeing discomfort and begin seeking the challenges that reshape you. The new self is forged in difficulty, strengthened by pressure, and refined through deliberate struggle. Comfort sustains the old self. Discomfort gives birth to the new one. Every time you choose discomfort over ease, you vote for who you are becoming, not who you used to be. 4. Rebuilding demands discipline, not motivation. Motivation is unstable. Discipline is reliable. People wait for motivation as if it were permission from the universe to change. But motivation is emotional. It rises when things feel inspiring and disappears the moment resistance appears. If rebuilding depends on motivation, it will collapse at the first sign of discomfort. The Stoics understood this, which is why they structured their lives around discipline, not feelings. Discipline is the bridge between intention and identity. It is the commitment to act regardless of mood, fear, fatigue, or doubt.
Discipline does not respond to emotion. It responds to principle. When you choose discipline, you choose long-term identity over short-term comfort. And that choice becomes the foundation of a resilient life. Motivation may initiate action, but discipline sustains it. Motivation starts the journey. Discipline completes it. When you rely on motivation, your life fluctuates with your emotions. When you rely on discipline, you take control of your trajectory. The Stoics practiced daily repetition, reflection, training, self-examination, not because it felt good, but because consistency builds strength. If you only act when inspired, you will never rebuild anything lasting. Reconstruction requires steadiness, rising when comfort pulls you back, addressing the hardest task first, choosing focus over distraction, growth over ease. These disciplined decisions accumulate into a new identity. Eventually, effort transforms into character. Discipline stops feeling forced and becomes natural. It is not punishment, it is freedom. Freedom from excuses, freedom from inconsistency, freedom from emotional volatility. Every disciplined action is a declaration of intent, a refusal to remain unchanged. Each repetition strengthens belief in who you are becoming. Motivation may inspire, but discipline transforms. Because rebuilding yourself requires stability, repetition, and structure. The new self cannot rise if effort depends on mood. But once discipline becomes your standard, you gain the power to reconstruct your life from the ground up, with clarity, strength, and stoic resolve. 5. Guard your environment as you guard your future. While rebuilding yourself, you cannot become a new person while remaining inside the environment that shaped the old one. Your surroundings influence you far more than you realize. The people you engage with, the spaces you occupy, the content you consume, the rhythms of your daily routine, all of it quietly molds how you think, feel, and act. If your environment is saturated with distraction, negativity, indulgence, or chaos, it will slowly pull you back into the very patterns you are trying to escape. The Stoics understood this with precision. They knew that the quality of your environment determines the quality of your inner life. Your surroundings are never neutral. They are either reinforcing your growth or reinforcing your destruction. When you are rebuilding, every detail matters.
The voices you hear most often become the beliefs you repeat internally. The behaviors you witness become the behaviors you normalize. The emotional tone around you becomes the emotional tone within you. If you are surrounded by people who accept mediocrity, it becomes harder to demand excellence from yourself. If your physical space is cluttered, your mind begins to mirror that disorder. Reconstruction requires intentional boundaries with your environment. You must consciously decide who has access to your energy, what information enters your mind, and which spaces support discipline rather than temptation. This may require limiting conversations that exhaust you, reducing digital noise that fragments your attention, or reshaping your physical surroundings so they reflect clarity, restraint, and purpose. Your environment should make it easier to act like the person you are becoming, not harder. Some environments are simply incompatible with your future. There are places where your old habits flourish, where your former identity feels welcome, and where the old version of you is constantly invited back. These environments sabotage progress subtly, without confrontation. Growth often demands stepping away, not because you believe yourself superior, but because you are no longer the same, and change requires distance. Your environment is a silent architect of your identity. It influences your decisions, your emotional regulation, your discipline, and your long-term vision. When you protect it, you protect your trajectory. When you neglect it, gravity pulls you back toward the past. Creating a supportive environment is not about perfection. It is about alignment. When your surroundings align with your goals, your behavior follows naturally. You do not have to fight the old self endlessly if you stop living in spaces that keep it alive. A clean room, a focused workspace, a quiet digital environment, and a disciplined circle often do more for transformation than raw willpower ever could. Protect your environment, and it will protect the person you are becoming. 6. You will have to outgrow people without apology. Without apology, not everyone is meant to continue into the next chapter of your life. There comes a moment when you realize that certain people were only meant to walk with you for a limited distance. Not because they are bad, but because the version of you they were connected to no longer exists.
You sense it in conversations that no longer nourish you, in relationships that drain rather than strengthen, and in the quiet awareness that you have evolved while others remain anchored to the past. Stoic philosophy teaches that life is constant movement. As you change, your relationships must either grow with you or fall away. Growth inevitably creates distance, and distance is often misunderstood. Some people will interpret your evolution as judgment. They will view your boundaries as rejection. They will label your ambition as arrogance. But the truth is simpler. You are outgrowing a dynamic that cannot accompany your future. As you rise, the gravity of your old environment attempts to pull you back, not out of hostility, but out of familiarity. People often cling to the version of you they were comfortable with, even when that version was shaped by fear, insecurity, or survival. Outgrowing people is one of the most painful yet essential elements of transformation. You will feel guilt because you were conditioned to believe loyalty means self-abandonment. You will feel fear because you wonder who will remain when you choose yourself. You will feel resistance because comfort whispers that change is unnecessary. But the Stoics taught that loyalty to your growth must come before loyalty to expectations that keep you stagnant. You owe your old environment no apology, no explanation, no justification for wanting more. Some people are emotionally invested in your limitations. Your self-doubt made them feel safe. Your predictability reassured them. Your lack of boundaries made their lives easier. When you grow, when you say no, demand respect, and choose alignment, they feel threatened. They preferred the version of you that stayed agreeable, quiet, and manageable. The old you required less. That version no longer exists, and you cannot resurrect it to preserve someone else's comfort. Outgrowing people does not mean you judge them. It means you stop shrinking yourself to match them. You are not abandoning others. You are returning to yourself.
You are not rejecting people, you are rejecting cycles that kept you trapped. You are not acting different, you are becoming who you were meant to be. Growth requires elevation, and elevation requires releasing weights you can no longer carry. If someone belongs in your future, they will grow alongside you, not resent your evolution. The moment you stop apologizing for outgrowing people is the moment your power returns. You stop defending your boundaries, you stop explaining your standards, you stop minimizing your vision. When you walk away from relationships that drain you, self-respect rises. When you release people who cannot meet you where you are going, clarity replaces confusion. You no longer waste emotional energy convincing others to understand a path they were never willing to walk. Outgrowing people is not only emotional, it is environmental, energetic, and spiritual. Sometimes the friend who lives for distraction must be left behind. The partner who fears your growth must be released. The family member who guilt traps you into staying small must be met with firm boundaries. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. Stoic wisdom teaches alignment with virtue, discipline, and purpose, and nothing destroys alignment faster than relationships rooted in stagnation. People will say you have changed. Let them. Change is the point. Evolution is the point. Distance is the point. Your transformation unsettles those who refuse to transform themselves. They want the old you, because the old you made them comfortable. But comfort is not your mission. Growth is. You do not need permission to rise. You can love people and still move on. You can appreciate the past and still accept that it is ended. Stoicism reminds us that clinging to what must pass is the root of suffering. Release with dignity. Walk away with grace, but never shrink yourself again to protect someone else's comfort. Your future demands a different self, and that self will attract different people. 7. Rebirth is a daily discipline, not a single moment. You do not transform once, you transform daily. Change is not a dramatic event, it is a repeated decision. Most people believe transformation happens in a single breakthrough, crisis, or resolution, but Stoic philosophy teaches otherwise. Real change is the slow, deliberate reshaping of identity through daily practice. Character is formed by what you repeat, not what you intend. You do not become a different person overnight. You become one through thousands of quiet choices. The old self does not vanish suddenly. It fades as you stop feeding it.
Each time you resist an old habit, you weaken the identity that once controlled you. Each time you act with discipline instead of impulse, you step further into your future self. Each time you choose courage over comfort and clarity over avoidance, you participate in your own rebirth. Rebirth is difficult because it requires consistency after enthusiasm fades. Motivation may ignite the beginning, but repetition sustains transformation. There will be days when strength feels natural and days when regression feels tempting. The Stoics measured character not by ease, but by response under difficulty. Your rebirth becomes real on the days you show up when you do not feel ready. The future self is built invisibly in ordinary moments. When you rise early despite resistance. When you read instead of scrolling. When you speak honestly instead of pleasing. It is built when you choose discomfort because it aligns with who you want to be. Transformation is not loud. It is deliberate, and most of it happens unseen. You must stop waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment, only now. Stoic urgency is not panic, it is presence. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Rebirth begins when you realize life is happening now. Delay only extends suffering. Each day offers a choice, not in words, but in actions, not in promises, but in habits. When you repeatedly choose the future self, change becomes irreversible. You stop trying to become someone new. You simply live as them. Rebirth is not a destination. It is a practice.
In every time you choose the higher path, even imperfectly, you are already rising. The old self had to break for the new one to emerge. Every moment of solitude, every boundary, every uncomfortable choice has been shaping this rebirth. Transformation is never an accident. It is deliberate, demanding, and often painful. The Stoics understood that real growth requires the courage to shed what no longer serves you, even when that shedding feels like loss, even when it isolates you, and even when the world cannot understand the path you have chosen. Change is not gentle. It asks for honesty when comfort would be easier, and discipline when avoidance feels tempting. Rebuilding yourself is not about becoming someone new. It is about uncovering who you were always meant to be beneath the noise, the fear, and the habits that once kept you surviving instead of living. Your next chapter will require higher standards, stronger boundaries, and environments that support clarity rather than chaos. It will require releasing people who cannot walk with you into your future and abandoning patterns that no longer align with the life you are determined to build. This path will challenge you to confront yourself without excuses. It will demand responsibility, courage, and self-mastery. But every uncomfortable step forward is evidence that you are moving closer to your potential. You are not starting from nothing. You are starting from experience, from awareness, from strength earned through struggle. Right now, at this very moment, you still have the power to choose differently, to think with intention instead of impulse, to act with purpose instead of habit. Every choice you make is shaping the person you are becoming. The rebirth you are seeking is not somewhere in the future. It is unfolding inside you with every disciplined decision, every boundary you protect, and every moment you choose growth over comfort. Stay the course. Remain steady. Your future self is not ahead of you. It is being built by you, step by step. This is the Stoic path. And here at Stoic Sage Academy, we walk it with clarity, strength, and resolve.